Welcome to the PCN Capitol Preview. I'm Francine Schertzer, and today we'll talk with Congressman GT Thompson. You can join our discussion by calling us toll-free at 1-877-PA6-5001 or text us at 717-219-4001. But first, we're joined by Charlotte Keith, investigative reporter with Spotlight PA. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
You've recently written about the Whole Homes Repair Act. For those that are unfamiliar, what does this program aim to do?
So this was a major new program that really got off the ground last year, and it was really intended for repairs, major repairs that affect, the safety and habitability of people's homes, like fixing a roof or a problem with the furnace. And it can also be used to make units accessible for people with disabilities or to make homes more energy efficient.
How would you characterize the demand for aid from this program?
Well, so far from what we've seen, especially in some counties, it's really been overwhelming. There were places where I think they were taking applications for 24 hours and then they had to stop because there simply was so much demand. Certainly, there are long wait lists in a lot of places. So I think overall, it's been, a very, very high level of demand.
What factors determine who receives the aid from this program?
Well, one thing that counties say they like about this program is that it gives them quite a lot of flexibility to kind of tailor the rules for their specific needs. And so in some places, the rules vary from county to county. And some have prioritized, older adults, and others have done it in different ways. So it sort of depends. But the overall thrust is really, helping people stay in their homes and keeping homes livable.
The program was launched with $125 million from federal pandemic aid. Why hasn't additional funding been added to this program yet?
So the program actually received more funding in last year's state budget, but then there was this sort of months-long impasse over some of those budget-enabling code bills. And when a deal was finally struck on those, more funding for the program wasn't included. But, people say that it's not so much that there's, stiff opposition to the program, just that it was sort of last-minute horse trading and it kind of got left on the table. I think supporters are certainly hoping there will be more funding approved in this year's budget, which Governor Josh Shapiro has proposed.
What is the likelihood that additional funding is made available in this year's budget?
Well, obviously, it's going to be, the final budget will be the product of months of negotiations. But I think supporters are optimistic because they say, the program passed with bipartisan support when it was originally created. And this is something that really affects all across the state has a lot of need for this funding. It's not just an urban or a rural issue. And so I think advocates for the program really hope that makes a difference in gaining widespread support.
Charlotte Keith, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
More of the PCN Capitol Preview after this short break. Welcome back. Our guest today is Congressman GT Thompson. Thank you for joining us, Congressman.
Francine, my pleasure. Thanks for the opportunity to spend some time with you.
As chair of the House Agriculture Committee, you said you'd like to pass the Farm Bill sometime this month. What are your priorities for this bill?
Well, my priorities are the priorities of those hardworking families throughout Pennsylvania and, quite frankly, throughout the country that go to work every day to provide us with the things that are essential in our lives: food, fiber, building materials, energy resources. And so that's why I've traveled literally thousands of miles across the Commonwealth and across the country to bring to the table those hardworking people that produce and process our food supply, our fiber, and so those, I guess if I had to lay out kind of my vision that has always directed me is that at the end of the day, this will be a highly effective farm bill, and it'll be one that restores a robust rural economy. Everybody benefits. No matter where you live in this nation with that. And then we can create the conditions where we once again see the population grow in these rural parts of the Keystone State and, quite frankly, across America.
A reminder to our viewers, if you have questions or comments for Congressman Thompson, you can join our discussion by calling us toll-free at 1-877-PA6-5001 or text us 717-219-4001. Now, Congressman, how are you working with your colleagues to determine what parts of the current Farm Bill are working and what areas need revisions?
Well, we've been working, part of the goal has been this will be a bipartisan, bicameral Farm Bill from the beginning. We we reauthorize the Farm Bill once every around 5 years, and which is about the right timing. It gives us a chance to fine tune and really identify those areas of the Farm Bill. And the Farm Bill is a significant piece of legislation. It's estimated the cost over 10 years is $1.5 trillion. There's 12 titles to the Farm Bill. It's everything from safety net for our farmers to deal with weather, to support for our land grant universities. So Penn State would be a part of that. Rural economic development, rural broadband, rural utilities, research. And so we've really worked in a very comprehensive way with hearings, and what at this point totals more than 80 listening sessions. Quite a few of those. The very first one I led was at the Pennsylvania Farm Show back in 2023, January 23. We did another one this year in 24. And I've had them in different counties: Lehigh County, Center County, Armstrong County. But we've had them all over the country. Probably approximately been in 40 different states and one territory. And I do that in a bipartisan way, bringing both Democrats and Republicans to the table, and listening to the voices of what I used to call rural America. I call it Central America today because of what we provide. And that's how we identify what the goals are. And we listen to we've done that not just in person. We've had portals for the general public to provide input. I'm proud to say that we've certainly brought more voices to the table in preparing for this Farm Bill than any time in the past. And we have a long history with the Farm Bill. First Agriculture Committee was formed in 1820, and that was the first time that we had a Pennsylvanian that chaired that committee. We had a second Pennsylvania just prior to the Civil War, and I'm the third member of Congress from Pennsylvania in nearly 170 years to chair this, the U.S. House Committee on Agriculture.
As you were conducting your listening sessions, were there common themes or concerns that you heard over and over again every time you'd meet with the constituents?
Yeah, there absolutely was. It was a lot had to do with the challenges that farmers and ranchers are facing in terms of weather. So the importance of crop insurance. And crop insurance isn't a handout. It's a public-private partnership. The farmers and ranchers purchase insurance, but it's not like fire insurance that, if unfortunately your house burns down, fire insurance will help to rebuild your home. Crop insurance just pays enough for the farmer and the rancher to pay enough bills that they're able to stay in farming and agriculture for the next year. And so, but crop insurance, the importance of research. My definition of American agriculture, Pennsylvania agriculture for that matter, is very straightforward. It's science, technology, and innovation. And so investing in that research, investing in our land grant universities, which provides a lot of the future leaders of that industry, and quite frankly is a great place for a lot of that research to be conducted. The importance of trade, that's a common theme that we hear. We went through the Great Recession back in 2008, 2009, and agriculture was really the only industry that did well during that period of time. But it was because we had robust trade. And so making sure we do have a couple programs that help facilitate that in the Farm Bill. One is foreign market development, so looking for new markets for the different commodities. And the other is market access program. Once those markets are identified, how do you help the rank and file farmer and rancher to be able to address that? And even if a farmer doesn't obviously, sells local, which is always great, it helps economically. It helps where other farmers around the country may be engaged in trade, as it takes some of that those commodities and selling them to a foreign market. So there's just a lot. Those are some of the priorities, though, that we've heard about.
The 2022 Inflation Reduction Act had provided $20 billion toward ag conservation programs on top of Farm Bill funding. What happens to those programs as the funding fades out?
Well, unfortunately, the Inflation Reduction Act, or the uh, uh, it was flawed how it was designed. Those monies actually disappear completely, whatever's not spent in 2031. It would also had some issues to where they had strings attached to that legislation that in a lot of states, including Pennsylvania, there are some states that 70 to 90% of the conservation practices we use today would not be eligible because of the climate sideboards that were attached to it. Conservation is such a great provision. We have a conservation title. 6 years I served as subcommittee chairman for conservation and forestry. I see a lot of good things that happen. It helps our farmers and ranchers really comply with very difficult regulations. It helps to make soil more healthy. It helps the environment. It helps the climate because it increases, those programs help to increase sequestration of greenhouse gases. But when you tie the hands of farmers and ranchers with those conservation programs, what we know has been working, it does make sense. There's an old saying, if it's not broken, don't fix it. And the Inflation Reduction Act actually tried to fix something that was not a problem. Where, our farmers and ranchers, it's estimated that they sequester nationally, and certainly Pennsylvania has a key role in this, over 6.1 gigatons of carbon annually, which is 10.1% more than what farmers and ranchers actually emit. It means that American farmers and ranchers, and here in the Keystone State, they're climate heroes. Nobody does it better anywhere in the world than the American farmer and rancher because of the application of science, technology, and innovation. So there are some issues I'm trying to fix with that. What originally Francine was $20 billion investment. Unfortunately, it's been determined that because of sequestration and USDA's inability to get that money out by 2031, it's actually down to about $14.5 billion. That's why I'd like to roll that money into the Farm Bill. That would actually mean that we could have that for conservation for perpetuity well into the future. As it stands now, when 2031 hits, which is not that far away, whatever money has not been invested will disappear.
What's the anticipated impact that the Farm Bill will have on the state's economy?
Oh, it's significant. In the Keystone State, agriculture is our number one industry. 1 out of every 7 jobs is directly, indirectly related to agriculture. It's about jobs, it's about economic impact, which is very positive, really large. It is about food security, because we have a nutrition title to help those families who are struggling financially in the Commonwealth and across the country. It's about national security. When you think about it, the most slippery slope to national insecurity is food insecurity. I've seen that firsthand in travels in different parts of the world. Where you have food insecurity, you wind up with infant mortality, illiteracy, chaos, terrorism. And so it plays a huge role. In fact, within the Farm Bill, we actually have, there's a small provision there that helps to prevent that in other countries. Food for Peace, which is what I've witnessed firsthand. It is people with full bellies and those really struggling parts of the world are less likely to engage in war and terrorism. And so, and it's a win-win because it's a market. We purchase the food from the American farmer, and then we provide it to the people of those nations. And it really is it's very effective. So so whether it's creating jobs and economic activity to national security to, quite frankly, a cleaner environment and a better climate, that's what the provisions of a Farm Bill does.
Can you talk a little bit about the tie between the energy industry and its impact on the ag industry?
Well, it's huge. When you think about rural America or Central America, it's at rural acreages where our energy resources are produced. There's a direct role for agriculture as we see such ethanol. And now we're looking at sustainable aviation fuel that can come from agriculture commodities. And it doesn't take away from food. That's a myth that's out there that, if we grow corn or soybeans for fuel, that we're actually removing it from the food supply. Even when corn or soybeans or a commodity like that is used for a biomass energy, whether it's ethanol or a sustainable aviation fuel, which is kind of the next evolution. The residuals of that, the enriched grains, which is a byproduct of that process, is used to feed livestock. So it helps to produce milk, and it helps to produce steaks and meat. And so it's really a kind of a win-win situation. There are some direct on-farm applications of energy that, as a part of the Farm Bill, to try to really to help our farmers cope with inflationary costs, because that's another struggle, Francine, that they're having right now. The cost of diesel fuel, the cost and availability of fertilizer. Agriculture can be pretty intense energy in terms of affecting production and processing. And so, we have programs to encourage on-farm energy production, whether it's through the use of methane digesters, which is amazing. It takes something that's quite frankly, can be a tremendous liability. Just the residuals of livestock, manure. Manure has the risk of, first of all, you got to store it. You have to be able to get rid of it. You have to keep it out of our streams to keep our watersheds clean. That makes it a real liability until the science came along to where we can have now methane digesters. And we have conservation programs that will help farmers make that investment, where they take their own money and they put it with these programs. And now we have a process by which we can generate energy, generate fuel, generate electricity. I was on a farm, and we have these in Pennsylvania. We have an early adopter over in Juniata County in Pennsylvania, and I've seen others around the country. One of the most interesting examples of the benefits of it is in Central Valley of California. The Amazon trucks that they're delivering commerce are all fueled off of the methane digester on a particular dairy farm. The methane goes into a pipeline, it's refined, and that's what's used to fuel these Amazon trucks. The carbon level is a negative carbon level compared to, it's much more negative compared to any type of alternative fuels that are out there. So it's very exciting. It's very exciting, and I think it's a great example in defining and showing in a practical way how American agriculture, Pennsylvania agriculture, is science, technology, and innovation.
Can you talk a little bit more about what energy policies would make farming more profitable in the U.S.?
Well, certainly bringing down the cost of energy, and that means being returning to the days that we had just a few years ago, where America was energy independent. We are the original energy state, the Keystone State. I'm very proud of the fact that the coal that was mined in the Pennsylvania 15th Congressional District, my congressional district, which is 18 counties, it's a third of the landmass of Pennsylvania. We actually provided the coal that fueled the Industrial Revolution and provided an arsenal of democracy to win 2 world wars. It is the home of a high concentration of both the Marcellus and the Utica natural gas plays. It is the place, the Pennsylvania 15th Congressional District is the site where in 1859, Colonel Edwin Drake drilled the first commercial oil well. And so we are one of the founders of a very intense energy. And today we do all kinds of research at places like Penn State with the newer energies that are out there, alternative energies. And so energy, there are a lot of dairy farms that exist today because of energy leases that occur for drilling on their farms. It's allowed them to stay in farming. And if we want to maintain food security, we need to make sure we maintain these farmers and ranchers. And so these, what I would call supplemental sources of revenue, play an incredible role in our food security. And they are heavily impacted. There's no doubt about it. As I mentioned, the use of propane, use of diesel fuel, fertilizer, which is energy intensive, that helps to grow, increase productivity, all strongly tied into the energy industry.
Members of the law enforcement community are asking you to include the FIGHT Act in the updated Farm Bill. That stands for Fighting Inhumane Gambling and High-Risk Trafficking. What would this bill accomplish?
Well, I'll have to go back and take a look at that one. I worked on similar bill. I assume similar bills in the past. I don't recognize it, the acronym on this one. I'll go and take a look at that. I'm assuming if it fits in the jurisdiction of the Farm Bill, it has to do with animal fighting. So dog fighting, birds cockfighting is what they call it. And the area that we see that most intensely is in our territories, where culturally this has been a part of it. Now, we have made it quite clear in the past with past farm bills that is unacceptable overall in American culture, and it is illegal. Former colleague of mine, I worked with him, Tom Marino. He's now back to being district attorney in Lycoming County, a good friend of mine, former colleague. I worked with him in the 14 Farm Bill, I believe it was, to make it a felony in these areas to be able to take a minor child to attend one of these illegal fights. And we just upped the criminal penalties for it. And so I certainly will take a look at this FIGHT Act and see exactly what it is and what it does. The Agriculture Committee, as the agriculture industry, is committed to animal welfare. Now, that's not animal rights. Animal rights can be an issue, but animal welfare is making sure we're caring for these animals, whether we use them as pets, we use them as companions, whether they work on our farms, such as herding sheep, some of the herder breeds, whether we eat them, quite frankly. We take care of them: food, water, shelter, health, making sure that they're healthy. That's animal welfare, and that's a principle that we're committed to with the Agriculture Committee as we look in that area of animal welfare.
Over the past year, you've been advocating on behalf of bringing whole milk back to school cafeterias. What prompted this proposal?
Well, primarily because what prompted it was in 2009, 2010, the Congress, which was a Democrat-led House and Senate, and President Obama in the White House, they demonized, based on bad science, milk fat. Whole milk and flavor. Whole milk is 3.25% or 3.5% milk fat. That's it. 1% milk is 99% fat free. Whole milk would be 97.5% fat free, or 97% fat free. And when they did that, they really hurt our kids. Milk contains 13 essential elements that we all need, no matter what our age is. And the whole milk is what contains that. And unfortunately, the Dairy Advisory Council has found that many of those essential elements, that really the main source comes from whole milk, is lacking. Now, I realize that there are people out there with a small percentage of folks that are milk intolerant, lactose intolerant, milk allergies. And so we don't force feed anyone anything. That was just the first thing. We cheated our kids out of proper nutrition. As a result of that, studies have shown that kids have actually got more obese, because when they're not drinking, the milk fat didn't make them heavy or make them fat. But the alternative beverages, when they stopped drinking milk because it was just a terrible milk experience, high fructose, high sugar, high caffeine, those things have had a detrimental impact and quite frankly, the BMI of the average student in these studies has gone up since they took whole milk and flavor out of the schools. And so it's number one, it's that move was bad for our kids. Restoring as an option, and that's what it is. It's not a requirement, it's an option back in our schools. Whole milk and flavor will be great for our kids. Number two, it crushed the dairy industry. We lost so many dairy farms, even here in Pennsylvania, where dairy is our number one agriculture commodity, largest commodity of our number one industry, which is agriculture. It had a devastating impact. And number three, the ripple effect is that our rural communities have lost population. Because when you lose a dairy farm, you lost the feed store, you lost the equipment supply store. When those employees left, well, you probably lost the grocery store, you lost the local community pharmacy, the hardware store, and all of a sudden, our rural communities, and we can see it quite evidently here in Pennsylvania, have gotten smaller. We've seen that in the past couple census since this was done, and it's time to reverse that. And we can do that by giving our kids a more healthy beverage option. So whole milk for healthy kids. Thanks for mentioning it. I'm very proud. It took a number of years, but I was able to get that out of committee and with a bipartisan support. Now, it's not in the Agriculture Committee. This is in the Education Workforce Committee, where I'm also a senior member. And it passed out of the House of Representatives with 330 votes, a really strong bipartisan vote. And this bill now sits in the U.S. Senate. Senator Fetterman is an early sponsor, co-sponsor of this bill, and it's got strong bipartisan support in the U.S. Senate throughout the country.
If this bill passes the Senate and makes its way for the president's signature, what would it mean for the ag community in Pennsylvania?
Well, first of all, it would mean more healthier opportunities for our kids, and that has to be a first priority. For the dairy farmers, it would be great news, right? It would be more opportunity to sell Class 1 milk, which is whole milk that that our dairy farmers produce. And for our rural communities, it may give us an opportunity to eventually grow back that lost population, that lost economic activity within our rural communities. And when rural Pennsylvania is stronger, all of Pennsylvania is stronger.
We're going to give the Congressman a brief break so we can tell you about some upcoming programming here on PCN. The PCN Capitol Preview returns tomorrow morning as we discuss the state budget's impact on business with David Taylor of the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association and Greg Moreland of the National Federation of Independent Business. That's tomorrow morning, live at 9 a.m. Join us for On the Issues this week as we sit down with candidates for Congress. We'll be joined by Kevin Dellicker, a Republican seeking to serve District 7 in northeastern Pennsylvania, and Democratic candidates John Broadhurst, Shemaine Daniels, and Blake Lynch, all seeking to serve the 10th District in central Pennsylvania. That's Wednesday night starting at 6. Cast members and fans of the 1968 horror film Night of the Living Dead gathered in Evans City in October of 2023 for the 55th anniversary to celebrate the film's influence on popular culture. Watch the Living Dead reunion special, followed by a viewing of the original Night of the Living Dead film with host Larry Kaspar, Thursday night at 8. All of the great public affairs event coverage and interviews you watch at PCN are now available for free online at PCNTV.com and on PCN Select. Thank you for watching PCN. PCN is a 501c3 nonprofit television network that receives no government funding. We're relying on viewers and donors like you to help PCN continue to bring you everything Pennsylvania. To make a donation, visit PCNTV.com. Let's get back to our discussion with Congressman Thompson. If you'd like to join in, please give us a call, 1-877-PA6-5001, or text us 717-219-4001. Now, Congressman, as we've been talking quite a bit about your role on the House Ag Committee, what can be done to bring in and encourage the future generation of farmers in America?
Well, Francine, first of all, I want to thank PCN because you helped do that. Your presence at the largest indoor agriculture exposition in the country, I would say the world, the Pennsylvania Farm Show, PCN plays a big role in that with just providing an awareness as you cover events. And that's so important. I mean, most people are generations removed from the farm. So anything that we can do to provide more awareness, I have seen it. It lights a spark in some individuals whose family hasn't farmed in probably multiple generations, or maybe their family never did, but so they're a first-time generation farmer. We support that through the Farm Bill, various programs for what we call new, young, and beginning. There are folks that want to change their careers. We see a lot of individuals, men and women, that come back from serving our nation, the military, and they find that that lifestyle there's just something healing about working with the soil. And so we want to be able to support that. We do that in multiple parts of the Farm Bill, providing access to capital, making that easier. Francine, I have met farmers and farm families that borrow more in a year to produce a crop or a herd than what the average American family borrows in a lifetime. Now, the goal is, though, they borrow it, they produce, and then at the end of the harvest year, they pay that bill back and hopefully have something left over for profit for their family, for them. So access to capital, access to information. And so we're looking at ways to how we've done that for numerous farm bills. We know that's a priority, that when given the fact that the average age of a farmer is probably close to, I would say, 59 and 60 at this point, we need to be able to help facilitate the pathway for the next generation of person, and those young families that will be there to make sure that we have a readily available supply of food and fiber and building materials, as forestry, energy resources.
As you hear people sometimes talk about the cost of food rising in recent years, how much of that is to blame due to inflation, economic factors, versus perhaps other factors?
Well, it's significant. And unfortunately, a lot of it was purposeful. I don't think it was done on purpose, but it was an unintended consequence of a purposeful action coming out of the White House, starting with energy. We had talked about how energy plays such a significant part in the cost of operation. And that's every business, certainly the business of agriculture. When you think about the life cycle of food from farm to plate, I mean, it's just not the production costs on the farmer that has gone up. It's the processing, because most agriculture products need some type of processing in order to get to your plate, and the transportation, the storage, and some of that is cold storage, and that's electricity. It's bad energy policy has really played a significant role in the cost. And Pennsylvania is interesting for being such a breadbasket of production. The statistics that I looked at most recently showed that Pennsylvania's food costs have gone up more than in probably any other state. It's close 32% increase. And even as inflation has come down marginally, those food costs remain high. And I think a lot of that is it's just the nature of Pennsylvania, where we grow our food, and then the population centers where food has to be transported, cost of diesel fuel, the cost. So that's transport from farm to production, from production to food distributors to grocery stores. That's a significant cost on the Pennsylvania families. I'd like to be able to say that I think that farmers benefit from that increase, but they don't. I mean, the farmer margin, farmers struggle as much or sometimes more than most families financially in Pennsylvania. That's one of the goals I have for the future of farming, and this would help attract new, younger, beginning farmers. Certainly would help to retain that next family generation on the farm. Is a pretty simple goal, but what can we? I mean, it's an answer to the question: what can we do to make farming profitable again? And so, a lot of what I work on and the things I look at those on the average, much smaller farms. We're not like the Midwest. We're, for example, the average dairy farm in Pennsylvania is it's probably about 95 head of cows, 300 acres of corn, soybeans, alfalfa, enough for feed. You get in California or Texas or even Florida, you're talking tens of thousands in terms of herd size. But those small farms are really important because those small farms really represent food security. And the fact that every farmer deals with risk, but if we can spread that risk over many smaller farms, that's just a smarter way to do business. I don't discriminate based on size. Some of those larger farms are incorporated, some small farms are incorporated. And the reason that happens, it's really family members coming together and they incorporate. So people like to call them corporations, and technically I guess they are, but they incorporate to protect their personal assets in the event that they would be sued. And, we live in such a litigating culture today.
I'd like to shift our focus a little bit and talk about some other issues that are before Congress. In the last week, both House and Senate passed a stopgap bill to fund the government through the middle of March. Can you talk a little bit about what passed this past week and also what the biggest areas of contention are moving forward?
Well, what passed was a continuing resolution, and I'm not a big fan of continuing resolutions. It provides too much uncertainty. It's short term. It's hard to really. It's just not the best form of government. But that said, what we passed last week on Thursday, I believe it was Wednesday or Thursday, was a process CR, and that was for one purpose only. It was to take 6 of the subcommittee appropriation bills and keep that funding going until I believe till Wednesday of this, which would be the day after today. It'll be Wednesday this week. At what point we're going to have, looks like we'll have all 6 bills. Now they will be combined, and we will have a vote. And I anticipate when we will ultimately pass those funding bills, it will be good through the end of this fiscal year. And included in those is the agriculture subcommittee bill, appropriations bill. And that's really important. That's one of the things to check off that I want to get out of the way so that I can move ahead in a timely manner here on the farm bill, getting that agriculture appropriations. And so obviously, some of the things that are in there, what was worked out in a bipartisan, bicameral way. I mean, both parties and different members have different priorities, but the bottom line is, you got to come together, you got to compromise, you got to get the best possible bill that we can. And I think this bill does that. I wouldn't call it a perfect bill. If I had the opportunity to write the bill or Republicans controlled all 3 branches, or the House and the Senate and the White House, it would look a little different from what if the Democrats controlled the House and the Senate and the White House. But the fact is we have split government. And so this was a pretty good bill. There was, it avoided, it provided some language in there to address the priorities. Actually, I think of both parties, to tell you the truth. And so getting these bills done is really important because it's time to start on the appropriation bills that we can do in a more timely manner for the next fiscal year.
When President Biden makes his next State of the Union address on Thursday, Bloomberg News reported that he's anticipated to call for increasing taxes on both corporations and the wealthy. Your thoughts?
Ain't going to happen. We're talking about many of those folks, not all of them, but many of those folks who are the job creators. And so if you want to take financial resources away from a job creator, that means many of them who who take profits that they may make in their businesses and they reinvest those into either higher wages, and we've seen that wages go up significantly in recent years, or they're expanding their business, which is a creation of new jobs. And so, it's I understand President Biden calling for that. That's the way he's wired. To to go after these folks, but to go after job creators, to me, it's just counterintuitive. What they say, a rising tide floats all boats. And so, if we can create the kind of impact, I mean, there are other things that he should be doing. I would like to see him do an emphasis on, well, first of all, I'd like him to mention the Farm Bill. So I'll be keeping track and see if he does that. It is America's #1 industry, not just in Pennsylvania. In fact, I think in almost every state except for Hawaii. And then Hawaii used to be #1, and that tourism thing has really caught on and kind of crowded out, although they still have a very robust agriculture industry in Hawaii. So I'd love to, if he wants to talk about jobs and economic impact and national security, I'd love to have him mention agriculture and specifically the Farm Bill. I'd love to be able to have a redo on the energy policy for all the reasons that we've talked about, the importance of that and the implications on jobs and economic activity. And quite frankly, based on all the primary elections so far, the polling data has shown that every state's a border state, and the #1 issue, #1 or #2, and every state is the border, and these completely open borders. There is some anticipation that President Biden may make some announcement on that, some executive reversal of maybe some of his executive orders. We'll see. So far, he really hasn't offered anything that's helpful in that area. He just wants more money, but he wants more money to deal with the symptoms and the signs of the bad policy has had when it comes to the border. It's very clear what works and what doesn't work. From 16 to 2020, the border was pretty much under control. There was a great Remain in Mexico policy where individuals would be processed for asylum in Mexico. There wasn't a catch and release. We've seen what has happened with murders and criminal activity and assaults. And so that is something I would love to hear President Biden address in a very thoughtful manner. We'll see if that's on his list.
Some health systems had halted IVF procedures following an Alabama Supreme Court ruling last month. Back in December, you co-sponsored the Life at Conception Act. Can you clarify what is your position on IVF procedures?
Very supportive. I think it's estimated, and I hope I get this right, but it's, as I recall, maybe 2 million of our fellow citizens in this country were born through the IVF process. And so, if you're pro-life, you're very much supportive of that process. And I certainly believe personally that life does begin at conception, and the IVF process is the application of science to be able to help facilitate that for individuals that need that.
On another topic, Norfolk Southern train derailed in eastern Pennsylvania on Saturday. Looking ahead, what steps should the federal government take to better protect both the environment and the general public from similar incidents in the future?
Well, the U.S. Department of Transportation, and specifically the rail area, need to be looking at, the current state of equipment, the status of it. Obviously, I've not heard. I've seen film clips that show the aftermath of that wreck, as well as the one a little over a year ago. A year ago or more in Ohio, eastern Ohio. I think that the federal government needs to be, and we do have an agency that, if properly led, they would be looking at what are the causal agents that led to that derailment, either of those. And I think that's a role for the federal government to work with the state in partnership to see what occurred. Was it something that was preventable? Was it a maintenance issue? Was it an equipment issue? Was it a technology issue? And then work with the industry to prevent that from occurring in the future.
You co-chaired the Career and Technical Education Caucus. Can you talk briefly about your motivation for becoming involved in this caucus and what initiatives you'd like to see come forth?
Well, I believe strongly in learning to earn. I'm a huge supporter of post-secondary education, obviously, both elementary, secondary, and post-secondary. But I don't believe that going to a four-year college is the only pathway to success in life. My family, my dad came out of the Navy, Korean War, used his military benefits, was trained as a tool and die maker in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, and worked in Bellefonte, Pennsylvania as a tool and die maker and providing for our family. And so there's many different pathways to success in life, and that career and technical education is one of those. I've been very proud to co-chair that caucus now for, probably for more than a decade. And we've had great successes, even during very difficult financial times. The caucus, which is a large bipartisan caucus, I've had great Democrat co-chairs. Now, a number of them are retired now, have moved on. And today, I serve, my co-chair is Congresswoman Susan Bonamici from out on the West Coast. And we have had, we've increased our investment in career and technical education every year, despite some financial challenging times like sequestration. And I was proud to be the one that carried the language for the modernizing career and technical education for the 21st century, being from the little town of Howard, Pennsylvania. So about maybe 700 people in one red light. It's probably less than 700 today. To be standing in the Oval Office when the President of the United States, last day of July 2018, my legislation was signed into law. And it has made a huge difference. We've brought the right people to the table to help guide what type of career and technical education is provided. We don't go based on just traditional programs. We look at in-demand needs. The bias, we've reduced the bias on these programs. At the time when we were working on this legislation, those programs were shrinking. Fewer and fewer youth and adults, because we also have some tracks for adults in these programs, were signing up for it. I'm very proud to say today, as you visit these programs, and the most recent one I was at was down in the Union Snyder County area, the Sun Technical Education Program, waiting lists. The programs are full to capacity, and there's a waiting list of individuals that want to go in. So it's really has impacted the opinion of the students, knowing that there's great opportunity here, and the parents. And today, when these kids graduate, they graduate with certificates, specializations, and a diploma in one hand, and multiple job offers in the other hand. And what they don't have is a student loan the size of a house mortgage. And so, very proud of the work that we've done there. It is like one of the most important needs of every industry today. We probably have more job openings today in this country than any time in history. And that's related to a variety of factors, some of it coming out of the COVID era. But we need these people that are qualified and trained. These are the people that during COVID we would call essential jobs. And so it's exciting to see what a difference you can make. Most recently, Congresswoman Bonamici and I have introduced in the 118th Congress, which we're serving in right now, that will go through the end of this year, 9 different bills. So we're not sitting on our laurels with the good work we've done on career and technical education. We continue to advance great legislation proposals in order to continue to improve the quality of career and technical education, specializations, access, affordability. In fact, we just came out of February, which was National Career and Technical Education Month, and we had a resolution to recognize that to help to promote the awareness.
Unfortunately, Congressman, I have to stop you right there. Congressman Glenn Thompson, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. It's always an honor and a pleasure.
PCN's Larry Kaspar spoke with Representative Napoleon Nelson about his proposal to allow students to take mental health days.
Why do you want to give students extra time off?
So what we know is that our students right now are really wrestling with their own mental health, wrestling with their being full and whole students in our classrooms. It's really, really a challenge that we're doing everything we can in the legislature and in our buildings to try and address. But sometimes we know that they just need a day. They just need a break. They just need to stay in bed, go for a walk, do whatever they have found to be restorative. And what we're trying to do is listen and be the best adults that they need in their lives when they know that they're going through something challenging.
Well, what kind of research has been done that convinced you this is a good bill to support?
In fact, it's something that most of our districts are already doing. So that's, in fact, the challenging part is, for many, this is almost a redundant piece of legislation. And that's because so many schools and PDE oftentimes will have procedures that allow wiggle room for school districts to allow mental health days, to allow students to call in without needing that doctor's note. It's, though not codified, it's not yet law, and that's kind of our job. And finally, I will say, they've told us, and parents have told us, what we're doing right now with House Bill 1519 is trying to be both the best stewards and listening while also trying to get a little bit of government just out of the way of students and their mental health.
How much extra time off does your proposal give to students?
So the bill as written right now is another up to 3 days without a doctor's note. Now, again, districts, we would love for them to consider the time that each individual student needs, but we certainly think that that's a great start.
And what are districts doing on their own? As you pointed out, the legislation could even be perceived as kind of duplicative, but you want to codify it. So what are they doing right now?
So again, most districts, and PDE has allowed school districts to allow up to about 10 days without necessarily needing a specific doctor's note. But that legislation, that program is really an administrative regulatory, let's call it a gray area, Larry. It's not something that is codified. It's not something that every district does. It's not something that every district has to do. So
Representative, why make it 3 days instead of 10, which, as you indicated, is a common practice?
Sure. And again, I think what many would argue is we could continue to go further. When does that cutoff happen? It could be 15 days that most students need. It could be as little as 1 or 2. I think 3 days both makes an awful lot of sense. There's also plenty of understanding that if you are going to be out for even if it's 3 days consecutively, that you ought to make sure that you're seeing a doctor. This is part of that keeping that says, over the course of a year, there are going to be a couple instances where you certainly ought to be able to be your best self and make those decisions with you and your family without the need of medical support, without the need of a doctor's note, without that sort of rigorous school district oversight over your absence. There is a separate component of this that we always have to think about, which is the whole separate struggle that we're having around chronic absenteeism. So we want to make sure that we're being very sensitive to being supportive of our students while providing the structures that really maximize their educational outcomes.
Well, overall, how well have Pennsylvania students coped with the stress of the COVID-19 pandemic?
Our kids are amazing. Pennsylvania students are very strong and resilient. I am both very proud of them, but I also understand that they are our children. All of the data has suggested that in Pennsylvania, throughout the nation, and realistically throughout the world, we are experiencing a mental health crisis. And it has been exacerbated. It did not start with COVID. mind you.
What was on students' minds before COVID then as a potential stressor?
All of the main things, right? So everything, it could be something like a pet passing away. It could be, just struggles with eviction. Many of our students are obviously suffering from homelessness, and plenty of our students are suffering from lack of food. Plenty of our students. It could just be, I'll call it a bad breakup. But I think what's important is when you appreciate what a student needs to be their best selves in the classroom, when you understand what students need so that they can sit, listen, absorb the information that they're getting from an educator, from a teacher, if they're not able to be their best and they're not able to be restored, then you're going to end up in this vicious cycle where perhaps they will do something that's outside of our normal code of conduct in the building on that day. But you're also, if you're not giving them time, what are you expecting from them the day after? And what are you expecting from them the next day, right? We need to always be sure that if we're finding ourselves towards that burnout stage, that you sit back, you relax, and you find a way to restore yourself. And when we don't offer those mental health days, you eventually, you can see our students just kind of go through this, I don't want to call it a tailspin, but problems don't go away on their own. And students ought to have that time to make sure that they're just being attentive to their own needs.
I'd like to talk about the point of view of Representative GT Thompson, because he's opposed to your idea. And he says at-risk students need to be in school the most of all.
Yeah.
What do you have to say to him?
Listen, and Representative Topper and I, Chairman Topper and I, work an awful lot on ensuring that our buildings have the adequate needs they do. The rest of that quote, in fact, was saying that those students who are in need of mental health ought to be in the buildings because that's where we can provide care. In that same meeting, though, we were also voting on trying to enhance our guidance counselors and the work that we can provide in our buildings around supports for addressing mental health.
Last question, Representative. Also, Representative GT Thompson says that time off for mental health should involve medical professionals. What do you think of that?
Again, I think that parents are really, really good at this. And I think, again, understanding where our system is in having enough guidance counselors, having enough therapists in this case, that someone who is really in need of rest and in need of recovery would have to go and see a therapist, would have to pay that copay, the out-of-pocket dollars, when they and their parents perhaps know what is best. We should listen. Hopefully they will. Hopefully Pennsylvania students will go and see those counselors or a therapist. But that shouldn't be the requirement from the school district in this case.
Representative Napoleon Nelson, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
That concludes today's show. Join us for another episode of the PCN Capitol Preview. We'll discuss how Governor Shapiro's budget proposal will impact businesses tomorrow starting at 9 a.m. I'm Francine Schertzer. Thank you for watching.